Hello and welcome to the D3 Energy live stream. I am Greg Davis, founder of D3 Energy. And again, this is where you can come and learn about the conventional oil and gas revolution, the paradigm shift that is happening now in our energy industry. And I wanted to thank everybody for coming back and joining and helping me to build the community and helping D3 Energy be a part of this conventional oil and gas paradigm shift. I want to take a moment today and say that obviously we're still dealing with the effects of Hurricane Harvey, and today is a national day of prayer. And today is a day that I and my family and everyone at D3 Energy is joining in saying prayers for all those that have been affected by this terrible storm. All those that have lost lives, lost friends, lost loved ones, lost family members, lost pets, lost homes. Praying for all those that are out there serving the community, continuing with this ongoing relief effort. Praying for all the first responders. Praying for everybody that's affected. And yes, Texas and Houston and I believe America is very resilient, especially in times like this. But we need to all come together and pray and say our prayers for everybody affected. It helps. And so my thoughts and prayers go out to everybody today. And Houston is getting back on its feet. As far as the energy industry, some of the refineries are starting to come back online now, and we're seeing that. We're hearing that Baytown refinery is coming back online, and oil is now being refined into gasoline and diesel and jet fuel. So that's a good sign. But we're going to be affected by this for months and months and months. And so what I wanted to do was pick back up a bit and talk a little bit about conventional oil and gas and talk about something that the industry deals with all the time, ever since the very beginning. The successful well versus the dry hole. So many of you who are in the industry know what I'm talking about, and if you're not, I'll share with you some of the experience that I have and some of the experience my father had and educate you a bit. So for those of you who are in the industry, I'm preaching to the choir, but a successful well. So what is a successful oil or gas well? It's essentially a well where we find oil and gas when we drill the well. And it can be successful in finding oil and gas, and it can also be unsuccessful in that it finds oil and gas, but not enough. So a successful well essentially is one where we find oil and gas and we find enough oil and gas to pay back the cost of the well and make a profit, make a rate of return. A dry hole is one where you either don't find any oil or gas when you drill the well, so it's dry, or you find a small amount of oil and gas, but it is not profitable to go on after you spend the money to drill the well to then complete the well. Because when you drill a well, there's the drilling phase that drills down into the ground and looks to see if you can find the oil and gas. And then when you complete a well, the completion phase is where you spend more money to complete it because we believe that there's enough oil and gas there that warrants spending that money. So a dry hole, again, is one where you don't find any oil or gas, or you don't find enough oil or gas. And to give you a little bit of context to this, so over the history of the oil and gas industry, you know, the risk in drilling wells has changed significantly. In the early days, there were no wells, and so the first wells were very risky, what they call wildcats. And then over the years, geologists and engineers got better at trying to study and predict trends, and they used to hand draw maps to interpret what the geology of an area looked like. And I have a interesting anecdote my father always used to tell. Again, my father was a big wildcatter, and he started drilling in the Rockies in the 1950s. That's when Davis Oil Company really got started. And after he moved there and started drilling wells, he and his team went on what he calls the biggest dry hole streak he's ever been on. And him and his team drilled over 60 dry holes in a row. They kept drilling and drilling and drilling and never found anything. And obviously, it was very frustrating. And he tells the story one day, he's driving with Mom, my mother. Were driving one day, and they needed to fill up their car with gas. And so they pulled into a gas station, and my father got out, and this is after drilling the 60 dry holes, and he gets out and he goes to pump gas into the car. And he finds out that the pump is dry. There's no gasoline to pump. He comes back to the car and says, "Barbara, there's no oil here. We can't fill up the car." And she looked at him and said, "You can't even find oil in a gas station." Now, I don't know exactly what that mood was like afterwards. He told that story, and my mom tells that story with a lot of glee. But I think I remember him saying he took that pump thing and threw it on the ground, and they left. So those were tough times. But back then in the 1950s and 60s, oil companies, wildcatters like my father, were drilling some of the first wells in an area. And in places like Wyoming, they would be drilling the very first well in an area of 23,000 acres. We chop up acreage in, just to digress a little bit, the United States is basically chopped up. There's these maps that basically delineate counties, and then counties are broken up into townships and ranges. And essentially a township is 36 sections of land, and 36 sections make up a township, so that's 23,000 acres. So they would be drilling the first well in a 23,000 acre area, so very risky. And the rate of success between, say, the 1950s and the 1970s was 1 out of every 10 wells was successful. And again, that's because there wasn't a whole lot of wells. I mean, those wells were the ones that were drilling into the ground, and geologists would interpret, and they would redraw their maps based on every well they would drill. But 1 in 10, or a 10% success rate, was about the norm. And then in the 1990s, with the advent of 3D seismic, and again, what 3D seismic is essentially an ultrasound of the Earth. Oil companies will shoot seismic into the ground and generate a map of the different layers in the ground. So it's like an ultrasound looking into the body and looking for things. And so with the advent of 3D seismic, the drilling success rates went much, much higher. In the 90s and through 2000, success rates went well over 50%, so 1 of every 2 wells was successful. And then, of course, you had the shale boom, which essentially, once the shale boom took off and oil companies saw you could drill into these shale or tight oil and gas sand formations, they were drilling right into the oil that before the technology came along, they couldn't get it out in economic quantities. But with the advent of horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing, you can drill into that oil or gas, and if oil prices are high enough, produce enough oil and gas out of the ground. So it eliminated the dry hole risk, if you will. And again, oil companies then left the conventional trends to go into these unconventional trends, because one of the things it did was eliminate dry hole risk. Well, with oil prices lower today, a lot of those areas are not as economic as they used to be. And so while an oil company can still drill into these shale formations, there is still the risk. So you won't drill a dry hole from a oil and gas standpoint, but you may not make all your money back. So you would still drill what we call an economic dry hole. So my point is, over the years, the ability for our industry to reduce the amount of dry holes and increase success rates has gone up dramatically. And now, with the oil industry having left a lot of these conventional oil and gas trends and left a lot of this oil and gas behind in favor of the shales, trying to reduce dry hole risk, companies are able to go back in now and take this modern oil finding techniques, not just the 3D seismic, the ultrasound of the earth, but also all these new drilling technologies and completion practices that have been refined during the shale boom. Because a lot of these areas have never had modern drilling technology applied to them. And some of these areas that companies are going back to, that we're going back to at D3 Energy, there hasn't been a well drilled in 20 years. And companies go back, and we're looking, and what we're seeing is, with modern technology, with the ability to data process and crunch data and take all the wells that were in an area and start tying them together, we're seeing oil and gas left in the ground right there that just needs to be drilled. And so the revolution is starting. The paradigm shift is happening. We're starting to see it now. Here and there on the internet, if you look around, you start seeing about companies that are starting to go back to conventional trends and blend in this conventional drilling. Because again, the ability to find oil and gas, in many cases, we're not drilling wells that have much risk at all. We're essentially drilling back into reservoirs that, with the old technology, we thought were depleted or were gone or enough wells have been drilled. But now what we see is that more wells can be drilled. Much like an unconventional well drilling into a shale formation, we're going back into these conventional formations that we see now with the modern technology, that all we need to do is drill a well back into it, and we can find economic quantities of oil and gas. We can avoid those dry holes and drill successful wells. So with that, I want to say thank you for spending some time today. Again, thoughts and prayers go out for everybody affected by the hurricane. And I appreciate you spending time with me today. And keep coming back, keep liking, share with your friends. Join me, join the D3 team in being a part of this paradigm shift, this new revolution, this evolution, this comeback of conventional oil and gas drilling in the United States. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you next time.